Hey everyone, I want to help explain to you some of the problems that occurred in the Roman Empire. Before we do a reading, let's check out this map I have behind me. I'll duck down a little bit for you. So this would be the extent of the Roman Empire in about the year 117. Um, that was a good time for Rome. They were spreading out. They were making a lot of money. They were roads, aqueducts, sewage systems. All of these things were being brought to all of these different regions around Europe. The problem is, though, wherever Rome went, it's not as if there was nobody living there. There were already people there, the people that we refer to as barbarians, that we know were just other civilizations, small kingdoms, other empires, and Rome forcefully negotiated with these people, either by war or through threats to get them to join. So from all the way up in Britannia, all the way over here going into Persia. You've got Baghdad and Mesopotamia way over here, way down here in Africa. The Romans were very effective in spreading out. The bigger they got, however, the more difficult it became to control. Be similar to a family with, let's say, 2 kids in compared to 10 kids. The family with 2 kids, you're able to feed your family more, you're able to control family activities a little more. But when you start getting into 10 kids, feeding that family becomes a little more difficult. Getting everybody to agree on what to do on a Saturday becomes more difficult, and so on. And you will also notice, right before we get into the reading, that this whole gray area up here never gets conquered by Rome. It's not that they didn't try. It's that this is the region that we call Germania, and now, of course, way over here, Russia. Those areas just had very, very thick forests. You had people that were fierce defenders of their land, and they were going to fight and die to protect what they had. So let's get into reading this internal weaknesses reading. I like this particular one. It's pretty short. And here we go. Read along with me. Internal weaknesses. Despite the occasional unbalanced emperor, the Roman Empire ran smoothly for 200 years. Then things began to fall apart. Disputes over who should be emperor caused the return of political violence and civil war. In some years, 4 or even 6 emperors were on the throne. By 235, the Roman world had plunged into crisis. In fact, there's one point, I'll tell you, I believe in the 300s, there was one year where there was 10 emperors just due to backstabbings, murderings, poisonings, ridiculous stuff. Rome really begins to fall apart. Okay, today's main idea, military problems led to a crisis in the Roman Empire. Military problems. So what went wrong? Arguably, the empire had physically outgrown the emperor's ability to govern. At its height, the Roman Empire stretched from Scotland to the Sahara, an area about half the size of the United States. This vast expanse with huge geographic and cultural differences was very difficult to govern effectively. Defending such a large area also proved difficult. Rome faced attacks on 2 fronts at the same time, which drained money and resources all across the empire. Attack on a front means a border of a war area. Rome fought in the east. Rome fought the powerful Parthian Empire from Persia, while Germanic tribes raided Rome's northern borders. Meanwhile, warring groups within the empire once again fought to decide who would be emperor. Civil wars bled the empire of desperately needed food, money, and soldiers. With so many Roman soldiers engaged in warfare, invaders from outside the empire invaded and plundered or stole riches from the unguarded interior. It was a sure sign of trouble when cities, including Rome, rebuilt their long neglected defensive walls. These military problems provoked further political and social problems. Political, economic, and social problems. War was not only dangerous for soldiers, it was disruptive for everyone. Emperors were blamed for not protecting the empire, and they were regularly replaced or murdered. 50 different emperors ruled between 235 and 285. 50. That's 30 years and 50 empires. I want you to do the math and tell me if you can figure out how many emperors that is. People living in what would become Spain, France, and Britain preferred to trust local rulers. They broke from Rome to form a separate Gallic empire. These events weakened imperial authority and prevented the strong, decisive, and long-term action needed to restore order. Imagine that. A part of Rome broke off and formed its own Roman Empire. It's not going to end well, but needless to say, it did happen. This constant warfare also ruined the economy. Trade was interrupted, and the empire had to rely on its inadequate agricultural resources. The people suffered food shortages and higher taxes. Wars are expensive, and the emperors expected the people to pay for them. Even heavier taxes were enforced when the imperial currency lost value. This affected rich and poor, but mostly poor. Tell you what, one other thing that happened before we read on is that Rome was running out of soldiers. They had expanded so far and were fighting two huge wars, one against the Germanians, one against the Parthians, and even another one against a people called the Picts way up in Scotland, that they began to recruit their enemies to be their farmers, if you can imagine that. So as they're recruiting their enemies, they're saying to Germanic tribes along the borders, hey, we won't fight you. In fact, we'll even let you be a part of our empire if you grow our food for us. The Germans gladly accepted because it meant that they wouldn't die, but then they also controlled the food sources. This is something else that's going to come to bite Rome in the butt later, having your enemy grow your food. Well, back to the reading. Ordinary people grew angry, criminal organizations grew, and outbursts of mob anger increased. It even became difficult to recruit local officials. Nobody wanted these jobs because people risked a beating for doing them. In these unstable times, good citizenship took second place to looking after oneself. And then let's go to the second page here. I really like this infographic. I think it's fantastic. Just some highlights of the decline of the Roman Empire. We have four categories of why it declined. And they just give us some highlights here. But we have military reasons, political, economic, and social reasons. Big military reasons: fighting the Parthians in the east, fighting the Germans in the west, and fighting civil wars at home. I mean, sometimes Rome's biggest enemy was itself. Political reasons: difficult to govern a huge empire. Govern means to rule. Frequently changing emperors and power gained by local leaders. I mean, our presidents only have their job for 4 years, maybe 8 at the most. There's a weird rule where it can be 10, but you'll learn about that when you get into high school. Imagine having a new president of the United States every 8 months. That would be very, very difficult to know what our country's supposed to do, and the people would get confused and chaos would happen. Let's go down to economic reasons. Trade was interrupted, people were heavily taxed, and lower value of currency. What that means is a standard Roman coin became worth less today than it was yesterday. So if this particular coin that I pretend holding today bought a loaf of bread, tomorrow it might only buy half a loaf of bread. But people aren't making any more money at the same time. So that's what we call inflation. Last, social reasons: unrest from, what does it say? Oh, sorry, unrest from gap between rich and poor. That just means social class wars. People, the wealthy and the poor, getting mad at each other. And of course, there's a lot more poor than there are wealthy. That's always been a reality of human history. More criminal organizations, and civic responsibility no longer important. That means people kind of stopped being good citizens. They started to look after themselves. All of these things are going on at the exact same time. In the next lesson, we're going to get into 2 emperors that tried to fix these problems. We hope you enjoyed learning about the, what do we call this? The internal weaknesses or problems of the Roman Empire. And I look forward to talking to you all again soon. Bye.